Hi, this is Denis Taaffe. I'm a guitarist. I'm in my home studio, and today I'd like to discuss with you the very obscure album which has been newly reissued. And I chose this one to reissue because it was so obscure. I mean, from what I recall, it was out only on CD for a very, very short amount of time. And it's actually Modern Rock Guitar, Volume 83, Future Visions 1. And there is a Future Visions 2 as well. This is a 2006 album, near the end of 2006. And it was actually my 68th album of 2006. So I honestly, by that time, I hardly remember recording it, which is maybe why I think it's so obscure today. In any case, it's got 14 tracks. It's about 69 minutes long. And, well, let's take a look and see what we've got here. Okay, and so we'll start off with the very first track, which of course is like the name of the album, Future Visions. Now keep in mind, in 2006, I was still heavily using audio samples, which are little pre-recorded pieces of music, really, that's been played by someone else that you use in a software program. And a lot of times on my older albums, I would always have an intro track, which was very much using those samples. So, in any case, let's take a listen to track 1, Future Visions. And I'm sure it has audio samples. We'll talk about it. Let's see. Okay, so that was the intro track. And as you can see, it was just 2 audio samples. It was the little synthesizer type techno little melody thing. And then this huge beat, which will come back in a later track as this huge bass beat. So let's move on to track 2. Which is really where I start playing on a track. Okay, and this is a normal track. It's about 7 minutes long, 6:52. All right, let's take a listen to that, and it's called Risk Analysis. Okay, so right off the bat, a few things I can tell you about this track. One, I certainly like the kind of laid-back feel to it, and the rhythm's good. By this time, I was using drum samples rather than my old drum machines, which really gave a washy sound and kind of ruined a lot of audio tracks. So this is the audio sample drums. The bass is actually guitar, lowered an octave, and then looped, and I played that on guitar. And then once it started looping, then I played the other instruments. And in this particular case, it was this backwards guitar starting out. I do notice also I have a few audio samples of synthesizers running through it. But I'm kind of glad. I think they were tastefully done in the sense that they didn't really get in the way, and they weren't a major feature of the track. Let's fast forward to maybe 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Okay, and here I was still using, I think, a Line 6 Pod XT Live for my guitar sounds, and by this time I had really honed them in as best I could anyway. And I'm really pleased with the guitar playing, especially the solos on this album, where I really took time to stretch out, and I was also pleased, they weren't just sloppy solos. I mean, you could hear every single note, and pretty much in time, even when I was doing sweep picking and things. So here I'd advanced a lot, playing-wise. So I'm very pleased about the sound. I'm also pleased by the overall feel of that track, being kind of laid back and things. Okay, moving on to track 3. Which is called Think Tanks. And this is a very long track, 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So let's take a listen to that. And there, obviously, I have the audio sample of the kind of machine-sounding techno type sound effect, almost like it's a computer. And we'll take a listen and see where it goes. Okay, so right there, obviously, I had the guitar swells. And again, a guitar swell is where you play a note with the volume down, the pick hits the string, produces the note, but you then bring up the volume on the guitar, and you don't hear the pick attacking the note, and it gives you that kind of almost synthesizer sounding, very smooth sound, almost like a swell. Okay, let's fast forward a bit, about, 3-minute 13 mark. So obviously the big guitar solo there, and basically going wild, switching between guitar solo and other sounds, guitar sounds. I got pretty good at doing that kind of thing. It was jamming. It was really what it was. Now you have to remember, all these tracks are improvised on the spot, and trying to keep a focused theme throughout the album. So far I've done that, it sounds like. But we'll see if we can get it a little more focused in, hopefully. So there, we'll fast forward one more time and see where I took this track. Yeah, a lot of times on these early albums, I put in some tracks that were just for guitarists, really. And they were basically long jams, where you just jam over a thing. And so you've got solos and freaky sound effects that you can make on your guitar and so on. Very much influenced by, of course, Jimi Hendrix, who, during live would do these really long kind of solos and jams and things. So that's where the influence came from for this track. Let's move on. Number 4, Scenarios. And that's a 10-minute track. Let's check out that track. Yeah, I really like this. This track is very obscure, but I really, really enjoy it. A lot of it is because of the rhythm. And it's laid back. I was very conscious about getting the drums kind of a laid back rhythm, and working with that. I really like the fact that there's a little phaser on that guitar, very much influenced from the 70s type guitar soloing. The nice thing about these solos too, when I say soloing, it's really part of the jamming, is that they're not just an 80s exercise in speed. I really tried to play to the track and try to get it to be a little better and to fit properly too. So very pleased with this track as well. Just the overall vibe of it, if that makes sense. Just this laid back vibe, which is I like very much now. Honestly, as I get older, some of the distorted guitar, especially the solos and things, man, I can hardly hear that stuff anymore. A lot of it just wasn't very musical. And whereas here, I think it was much more musical and kind of laid back. It wasn't a test of speed or technique or anything like that. All right, let's fast forward a little bit on this track. And it's a really long track. We'll go to the 5-minute mark. So there you go. So I really got to take my time and really stretch out on guitar solos. Very much, very much influenced by, of course, Jimi Hendrix, like I mentioned, but also people like Frank Zappa and so on. he had that album, Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, or something like that. So it's very much influenced like that. Let's hear a little more. Yeah, that's very tastefully done right there. I like that. Yeah, I really like that track as well. You know, a lot of the earlier music that I did and tracks and things, I don't quite enjoy it. Let's put it that way. I don't quite enjoy it. Certainly not as much as my current albums. You know, I'm up to, I think, volume 247. And since volume 200 to 247 I really changed styles, and I'm enjoy that much more. But there are some albums that, past albums I do like very much. And this is certainly one of them. Just the overall feel of it and things, I think it was very much in the moment on these tracks, It was no struggle at all to create it at all. It was basically, when you're improvising, you just hear what's going on and find guitar parts that fit, and sometimes you fall flat on your face, other times it works pretty well. And from what I remember, this album was very simple, and those are usually the best albums. If you're really struggling with an album and every track is, hard to record, and those are usually not the very good albums. But from what I recall, this one was very, very smooth. In any case, okay, let's take a listen to track 5, and that is called Global Trends. And it's a very short track. It's like a minute, 20 seconds. So I'm not sure what it is. Let's take a listen. Okay, and this makes sense only if you've heard the previous tracks. The intro track, again, it has that real deep kind of drum bass sample, and then some minor keyboards, which are also sampled. I didn't play on this track at all, and I put it in here. I'm assuming it's kind of linking all the tracks together, and probably an intro to the next track. Let's find out. Okay, so number 6, Strategic Visions. So let's hear that. Okay, so here I'm really combining audio samples and actual playing. What I contribute is obviously the guitar swells and the bass there. Not too pleased with the bass sound there. I think it could have been a lot tighter. These are things, that I worked on from album to album, trying to improve the sound quality and playing and so on. And then you hear that little chatter thing, which was a little, audio sample sound effect it was supposed to be police chatter, you know. So here we go. Let's fast forward a little bit on this track to the 2-minute mark. Okay, it makes for an interesting track. Let's see where it goes from here. Track 7, Innovations. There's that laid-back feel again. Very nice. Very much in the pocket, you know, if you want to call it that, rhythm-wise. And that's really what I was going for with this track, as I recall. So here you're not going to hear, you know, a huge guitar solo extravaganza. Instead, it's real atmospheric, and that's what I was going for, and rhythmic. I very much like that track, and very surprised that, from what I could recall during this period of 2006, I was maturing musically, you know, getting away from, well, non-musical type things, if you want to call it that. But basically, you know, being more aware of atmosphere and depth and rhythm quality and that kind of thing. And I very much like the laid-back feel of it. And I think it's in very much contrast to the, to the ones where I use the techno samples and things, you know. Which really, I think, probably this album could have done without, I guess, at the time. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Asymmetric Conflict is number 8. Asymmetric Conflict. Let's take a listen to that. There we go. It's okay. You know, you have to understand too. You know, I had fun recording these albums, and so nothing's more fun than just to improvise guitar solos, you know, and that kind of thing. But musically, you know, I much prefer the more laid-back tracks, and I understand there's 2 themes running through the album. The kind of techno-ish tracks and then the laid-back tracks. I wish I had done an album of all laid-back tracks, which I would do now if I had a choice, you know. But back then I was experimenting with different things and starting to change musically. You know, I think it was maturing musically, if there's such a thing. Okay, let's move on to Volume 9. Space Operations. one thing you should know, I'm certainly not a drummer. And so when I was using these audio samples, drum samples, I would come up, mixing different audio drum samples, and they, probably didn't really fit together and that kind of thing. But I tried to get what I wanted by doing that. Sometimes it was successful more than others. Here, I think it fits the album well, that track, but it's that kind of techno-ish sound and using those techno samples. And that's one theme that's running throughout the album from track to track. And then there's the more laid-back thing, as I discussed before. Okay, and that's a 10-minute track, so let's just give it a chance here. Fast forward to the 5-minute mark. So, it's not a bad track by any means. I very much like the guitar sounds I did come up with that fit the track pretty well. Okay, moving on. Number 10.
Disruptive technologies.
All right, let's take a listen to that. There's back to the laid-back theme. Yeah, and there I was really learning to, play with guitar solos where it's not always this huge distortion, and squealing guitars and so on, almost as if it had a voice, so some notes will be softer than others and those kinds of things. So this was definitely a good learning experience. The other thing is, what I'm noticing is, a lot of times I would kind of get lost when I was improvising and playing. And I'd end up with these gigantic tracks. I mean, they were like 15 minutes, 20 minutes long. Much too long for an album. So I would cut them. And so an early track might sound like a later track because it really is part of the track, except I cut some of it out because it was so darn long. Okay, moving on. Chaos Theory. Let's take a listen to that. Back to the So there I'm putting swelled notes and chords over. Anyway, this sounds very much like a continuation of an earlier track as well. And this is the thing, I'd have these really long tracks and then would cut them, to make 2 tracks so that it would fit the album and not lose everything that I had played or recorded, And I can tell in these tracks too, it was a really, gave myself time musically to really stretch out on ideas and improvise and see how far I could take it, and see which direction it would go in. Big guitar solo. And from recording these things, though, with the big guitar solos and so on, it really helped me develop my own guitar style, if you like. And so I very much have a distinct soloing style developed from recording these albums. And then also another style, which is basically coming up with more ambient notes and swells and delays and things like that. Chordal style, if you like. It's going to be very hard to explain, but it's all developed from recording these albums. Okay, let's move on. Number 12, Deterrence. And okay, and here it's obviously going back to real basic rhythm, chords, and single notes. I can tell you where the influence here is coming from Rush, the band Rush. It might as well have been a Black Sabbath type riff, but it's actually coming from listening to Rush. Early Rush, where they had things like I'm Going Bald and other songs like that, Working Man and so on, which were very much real basic kind of rock rhythm guitar. We can fast forward a little bit. Let's see where that goes. So one thing you'll happen to notice here is that the drum samples kind of fall out. And remember that track, the 5th track I think it was, and the 1st track, they have that real deep drum kind of sound. It's almost a subsonic sound. And then you have the police chatter and so on. So that's in that track, and that's how the track ends. And that's very much influenced from my idea of composing music for films, and so they have a theme, that's followed, and eventually the person gets caught and so on. Just imagining that while playing. Okay, there are 2 tracks left, and number 13, called Cold War, a very short track. Let's hear that. Okay. And this is basically the overall theme of the album here. Once I figured out, oh, here's the rhythm track, I realized it was really the overall theme of the album. And it makes sense linking all the tracks together, really. Okay, now the last track is called Nuclear Arsenal. Let's take a listen to that one. Oh, yeah. There's that subsonic drum pop. This ends the album. I didn't play anything on this track at all. But here we've gotten rid of all the techno things, and that's all that's left. The drum, and it ends the album. I thought it was a neat sound, and I guess at the time I thought it was a neat way to end the album. And it works overall, you know. You finally figure out the overall theme of the album, and a different ending for sure. Yeah. So, there it is. That is Modern Rock Guitar, Volume 83, Future Visions 1. And there's a Future Visions 2. And you have to remember the cover. I forgot to mention the cover. The cover of these is looking down a train car, a subway car. And all of the seat covers are red. And it just keeps going and going and going. And, well, on the second one, they're blue. But they're also linked to two earlier albums, which were, I think, 77, 78, something like that. And those were the outside of the train cars. So there's a secret tip. You know, that kind of links them all together. Well, let's talk about overall. For me, I do very much like this album. And my favorites are definitely the laid-back tracks. You know, with the really nice guitar solos, you know, that are conscious of the rhythm and so on. They're not just screaming, you know, crazy guitars. And very much, to me, more musical and things. The techno stuff, the techno samples I could do without, really. But they do fit the album well overall. So here, really, I see three themes. One, the laid-back stuff. Two, the kind of techno-ish guitar tracks, kind of more rock tracks, really. And then third are these sound effect tracks, if you like. The first, the fifth, and then the last track. And the last track being nothing but this drum, you know, that was heard in the first and fifth tracks as well. Anyway, that was the thinking back then. Yeah, very pleased with this album. And I hadn't heard it in, well, probably not much longer after I recorded it, to be quite honest. It's been that long. Very pleased, though. Very pleased with this album. So there it is. See you next time. Bye.